so that must mean it's Meeple syrup time. And tonight we are live and direct from London, Ontario, Canada, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and wherever our guests happen to be, we'll get them to explain where they are in a second. Erica, what's up?
Okay. So we are going to be talking to two lovely people, all about production, all about getting your stuff out there, whether it's prototypes, whether it's the actual game, and everything, I guess, in between. We're going to hear a bit more about kind of what that's like and some of the things that they have to deal with, and hopefully some helpful hints for people who might be interested in getting to those things themselves. So let's start off with Kerry. Kerry, can you introduce yourself? So Kerry's with Panda.
Hi, my name's Kerry McIver. I work with Panda Game Manufacturing, and I work as an account and project manager. So I'm basically working with primarily clients who are going to Kickstarter for the very first time or are self-publishing for the very first time. And we kind of serve as a point person as we walk you through the quoting process. So when you have component ideas or concepts, you can come to somebody like me or someone on my team, and we'll tell you how much all that stuff costs, ways that we can bring those costs down, ways to optimize your game, and kind of assist you as we go through that process. And then once that's done, project management starts, which is the rest of manufacturing.
All right. And next, we'd like to talk to JT, and he's with Game Crafter.
Hey, I'm JT. I've been on the podcast a number of times before, yeah, I guess the Game Crafter is a place where you can get custom-made games one at a time. Panda serves an audience where you have to do 1,500 at a time, which is great when you're doing a production run, a full production run. But a lot of times you only need 1 copy or 10 copies or 100 copies, and that's where the Game Crafter can really help out. So you basically upload some artwork to our website, and then you're ready to order a copy, and about a week later, it'll show up in the mail.
That's awesome. And that's exactly why we wanted both of you on, is sort of, I feel like you guys together are almost like that start to hopefully finish for people, and seeing all those steps in between. Mm-hmm. So actually, let's get into that just a little bit more, is kind of talking about what does kind of a quick, what does production look like on your end? Just so when we're starting to talk about more of the specifics, people understand sort of what level we're talking about. So let's say someone's approaching you, obviously at different levels, but we can say, JT, someone's approaching you like, I've got a game to print. And we can say, Kerry, someone's kind of said, I've got a game to put on thousands at a time. Just sort of what that looks like in maybe like a minute to 2 minute like blurb. So let's start with JT. I come to you, I've got a game. What happens?
Well, you probably don't talk to a Game Crafter employee unless you're having a problem. Our website is very much a wizard-driven kind of thing where you're just filling out a form and uploading some images. And like I said, as soon as you're done with that, you can order a copy. You can also select components that are not printed, so dice or pawns, that sort of thing. But yeah, as soon as you've uploaded your images and proofed them to make sure that things are going to cut well, that sort of thing, you order a copy and it's on its way.
Okay, and how many copies can I order?
You can order 1 to whatever. Generally speaking, though, we specialize in less than 500 units. So you wouldn't, if you're going to go higher than that, it's going to be cheaper certainly to go to somebody like Panda and get 1,500 units.
Okay, so let's say I now love my game. My game is great. I want to go to Panda. What do I do?
Well, welcome to Panda. You guys are absolutely right. What we've kind of figured out is 1,500 units is sort of a sweet spot where all of the setup fees and things like that it takes to mass produce something makes sense, not just for us, but makes sense for our clients too. Like I said, a lot of my clients are doing this for the first time. And so we want to make sure that it's not something that's going to break the bank. We are all gamers and we want our, games to be out into the wild. So with us, you show up on our website and we have a place where you can request a quote. You'll fill out all the components. There's lots of really handy comment boxes. So if there's something that you feel isn't represented or something that you don't understand how to enter, you can always just type it in and it will come to an account manager who will kind of dig through that, get pricing all together, answer any questions that you have, and then touch base with you when we have a quote ready. If you like how that looks, you sign it and we begin our production process. And in that process, we get you assigned to a pre-press specialist who will go over any of your files to make sure that those look right for printing. We'll get digital proofs for you to approve. what's considered a pre-production copy, so all of the printed materials for you to approve, as well as a mass production copy for you to approve as well. And then your final mass-produced 1,500 copies or more will be delivered to your destination.
And now I have a game.
Ta-da!
Would you happen to know any really good pre-press specialists, Kerry?
I mean, I know a whole team of them. I happen to know one very, very well. My husband is now a panda as well. We've enveloped him into the fold of our embarrassment, which is what a large group of pandas is called, is an embarrassment of pandas.
Are you serious? I didn't know that. And I'm Chinese. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean,
like a prereq.
Truth be told, I've just trusted when that's been said to me. I haven't Googled it myself, but it's my understanding that a large group of pandas is considered an embarrassment. So I'm no longer embarrassing by myself. I'm embarrassing as a duo.
Right. With your award-winning husband. That's awesome. So let's talk about some of the tools that have been developed over the last little while by both companies in order to help game designers get as close to print ready as they can before engaging like a pre-press specialist. So things that the account manager can point them to, things that the game crafter has done through software, et cetera, et cetera. So let's start with you, JT. JT, one of the recent innovations, like literally it's an innovation that the game crafters come up with, is the whole component studio thing. Can you explain to us what it does, what it is, where it came from, where it's going, and why it makes the game crafter like even more awesome than it already was?
Sure. So Component Studio is basically what you need to do before you design a game. It's before you're ready to print a game, I should say. It takes that work that you would normally do in something like Photoshop or Illustrator and automates it. So a lot of times in a game, you'll have a set of tiles or a set of cards, something like that, where it's basically one design just with new data on each card. If you're doing that in Photoshop or GIMP or Illustrator or InDesign or any of those kinds of tools, what you end up generally doing is having to do that 50 times, 100 times, however many cards you have, and it takes forever. And the worst is you notice that you need to make a change. Now you got to go back and redo 100 cards again. So the way Component Studio works is you design a single card, and it automatically designs the rest of yours based on a spreadsheet of data that you have. It can import fonts, images, colors, everything in an automated fashion. And then it can ultimately export to a print and play PDF, so you can print it at home. You can export it into Tabletop Simulator, so you can turn it into a video game version, basically. And of course, you can export directly into the Game Crafter, so you can get a full production print of it. We also have an export for CMYK PDF that is in the format that Panda would need, for example, to be able to print your game directly out of Component Studio. You send that PDF to Panda, and now you're ready to print for long run too.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So, and Kerry, tell us about one of the things that I've seen that blew my mind. I think I actually have it right here, because I am a Panda fan. That might make me a Fanda? I don't know. Is this book right here? This design guidebook. Oh, hey, look at that.
Matches.
We're matching. That's awesome.
That's an awesome book.
It is. If you are at all a graphic designer who nowadays, you run into graphic designers who've never actually done pre-press, like because they've never had to. They work digital. You need to get this if you're thinking about doing anything in games, not just with Panda, but with anybody. This book is like a little Bible for graphic designers. So, Kerry, tell us about how that came to be, how it's helpful to people, and why it's a good thing for everybody just to look at.
Yeah, well, I have to completely give credit to our pre-press department. They really saw a need where it existed and filled that need, I think, in a really, really incredible way. So the design guidebook is the end-all be-all for setting up your files to be ready to print. It gives you everything you need to know about setting up bleed and margin, the types of files you need to set up, how you need to establish the color schemes and things like that. And it's kind of a one-stop shop for prepping your files before our pre-press team goes over it. The reason it's really important to do that is the file verification part of our process is really the most dependent on how quickly we can get your files ready to print. So if you're able to do that on your end a little bit more than normal, then we can get right into production much more quickly. And if you're doing Kickstarter or something like that, you're able to get those games to your backers hopefully early, you know, rather than on time. So the guidebook, and it's available in print. What's really nice about it, I think, is we are constantly working on it. So for us, it's a living document. It's available on our website, pandagm.com. We have a resources tab and the PDF there. And so anywhere, but we always have it at conventions. And although we have them printed, like I said, when we make changes or we see that there is maybe new components like double-layered punch boards or things like that that are starting to emerge in the industry, we can include those in the guidebook. So if people are considering using those as components, they have an idea from the very beginning of how to start prepping their files for that, so there aren't any hangups in the process from the time, you know, their Kickstarter ends or they're ready to sign that contract to the time we get into to manufacturing.
I think that brings a good point, and both you kind of stepped around it, is the idea of kind of what could go wrong. Because I think a lot of people, this is their first time approaching, you know, getting something printed, either whatever level. And so I'm kind of curious, and this is probably a good kind of like mini lesson for anyone who's interested in going down this path. Just what are people not prepared for when they go to produce something? So why don't we start with JT, and then we'll start working up to like the larger level. What are people honestly not prepared for when they go to put something together?
I mean, the first time you're a game designer, there are so many skills you have to learn. You're not prepared for any of it. I mean,
that's fair too.
And we're really not even. I mean, game design is a whole skill by itself. But then you've got to learn about writing and editing. You've got to learn about graphic design and illustration and the difference between those two things. And then, of course, once you start printing something, whether you send it to the GameCraft or a Panda or wherever, you are learning about things like bleed and drift. And so I think the biggest thing that people mess up on, at least with us, is drift. I mean, we put together drift and bleed. I mean, we put together a lot of videos. We have online proofing tools and all of that stuff, but they don't understand how the ink gets to the edge of the card or the edge of the board or the edge of the whatever. They think it's printed to the edge, when in fact it is printed on a bigger thing and then cut down to size. And so understanding that relationship is really difficult for a lot of people because they've never experienced that sort of thing. But like I said, it's not just that, it's a whole plethora of skills. And then if you decide that you're going to publish your game, now you have to take on a whole aspect of, customer service, accounting, and various business practices, logistics, the whole 9 yards. It's huge.
Yeah, it is a business. You're 100% right.
Yeah.
All right. So let's say we're going to go a step up. What kind of are some of the things that people are just not ready for, Kerry, when they start to go through this process, or not predicting?
I think a lot of people, when they're playing games or they feel inspired to design their own games, they're looking at it from a player's point of view. They're not looking at it from a manufacturer's point of view. So I think a lot of times people might not consider manufacturing as they're designing games. And while manufacturing should never be a barrier to entry for good game design, it is something that if you're planning on pitching it to publishers or things like that, that you should always have in the back of your mind, which I think is something that is really nice about Panda, that you don't necessarily have to have a game ready to be published. You can reach out to us for pricing if you want to have that information ready to pitch to a bigger publisher to say, hey, I know that these 120 cards and these 16 meeples and 12 dice are going to cost X amount per unit. And that kind of gives you a leg up too, because you have some background knowledge on how it all works. So I think there is a kind of a hurdle of information, because not everybody is fortunate enough to work in board gaming for a living. And so, there's so much information out there. And I think people are really well served to look through that information, use what's available to them, use their resources, and ask as many questions as you can. That way, when it is time to go to manufacturing, you've kind of exhausted everything you're unsure about, and you feel really confident going into that process.
Excellent. Speaking of questions, Eric Slauson on the newsfeed says, "Can JT talk a bit about the crowd sales on the Game Crafter? I feel like they are an interesting, happy medium between self-publishing and kickstarting." What do you think, JT? Is that where it fits?
Yeah, that's exactly where it fits. The idea. So I've done a lot of crowdfunding campaigns in my day, and universally, I hate the back half of it. That whole survey process and the logistics involved in that. It's not. Kickstarter could have done such a much better job with that, and so could Indiegogo and all the other platforms that do that. Basically, the problem is you're twofold. On the front end, people are excited and they're wanting you to do these stretch goals and all that kind of stuff, and that can destroy your budget. You might have gotten a quote for something, to get the base game down, and then by the time you're done with all your stretch goals and stuff, now your box is the size of Kingdom Death Monster or in Gloomhaven or something, where you've got to really lift with your legs, not your back. And so it gets out of hand. So that's on the front end of it, and then on the back end of it, you have this problem where you have to collect these surveys, you have to get the right address data, your all of the different add-ons that somebody might add, that sort of thing. So what crowd sales do is it's a crowdfunding platform on the Game Crafter that solves both of those issues. The first thing is when somebody, the more people that back, the cheaper the thing becomes. Rather than adding stretch goals, we're actually reducing the price for everybody, because that's the whole point of volume anyway, right? The more you can produce, the cheaper you can do it. So the more people that back, the cheaper the price becomes for every single person that backs. And then ultimately, we have collected their address information, how many copies they want, what add-ons they want included, all of that stuff. So as soon as the crowd sale is over, it immediately bills all the credit cards, and manufacturing begins right then and there, because the game has already been designed up front, all the art is in place, it's all been proofed, everything is ready to go. And so generally speaking, somebody that does a crowd sale, their backers will have their game 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, not 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months later or years later, because it's just one and done. And then, of course, they get all kinds of benefits on the Game Crafter besides the crowd sale. I mean, the designer does, but we don't have to talk about that right now. You just asked about the crowd sale. So,
yeah. No, but that's a really neat thing, because these are things that not a lot of people who don't use the Game Crafter actually know exists.
Right.
And it's really interesting. So I had this talk with somebody the other day, I can't remember where, probably on Facebook, about why it's important for designers to, like Kerry said, and like you said, JT, that we have all these weird skills that we have to somehow get a hold of, or at least get an understanding of. And I was talking to them about, one of the best things I ever did was work a sales booth where not a single one of my games was being sold. I did at Origins last year with Lion Rampant, selling all the Zuck stuff.
That's a great idea.
It was just really good to understand, how to teach games to people that I didn't know, how to pick a game for the audience when I had no skin in the game at all. Like, I didn't care. I wanted the best game for the person. I wanted them to walk away happy, right? As opposed to walk away with my particular own game.
Right.
And so I'm just thinking of this, the crowd sales on TGC, as being a nice way for people to kind of dip their toes into seeing what it's like to manufacture, what it's like to get all those quotes, what it's like to, do a little bit of the kickstarting, and then maybe they'll have an idea of why our residuals are low on the designer side and why publishers get the lion's share, because they do a whole lot of work, right?
They do.
And why we have to do why landed cost is different than a manufactured cost, is different than MSRP and all that kind of stuff. So it's just a really nice way to do that, where there's really not a lot of risk. And so I think that's pretty interesting. Eric Slauson also said that people are not prepared for using the metric system. Unless you're Canadian, right, Erica?
Yes. Well, I love when I show someone the temperature or something on my phone and they giggle because it's like they're American and they're like, a Celsius. Like,
Celsius is so funny.
I know.
Silly Canadians. Excellent.
In your funny ways.
Yeah. So, Kerry, I know that Panda's not going to be able to do that, like the crowdfunding and things like that. What does Panda offer a publisher that the game crafter just doesn't handle? I know you have a different market, right? So what's the difference?
Yeah. So for us, really, our process starts typically like after that Kickstarter point, right? Because you're making so many more games, although with, you know, a higher quantity, you are paying less per unit. There is a little bit more upfront that you have to kind of show up with in order to get that process started. And so for us, like I said, it starts, you know, after the Kickstarter is done, and we require just half of what the game costs to create. And so from that point, you should already be working with somebody hand in hand, but all of those kind of up in the air questions, you're going to get a personal touch. You're hopefully not ever going to be confused about where your game is in the process of production. You're hopefully never going to feel as though, and this is not to imply that you feel that way with the game crafter, like the game crafter is doing awesome. But, you know, we want to make sure that you feel comfortable because this is a really big investment. And we understand that designing and publishing a game is a lot of work. And so we want to make sure, first and foremost, that since you've already done all that work up front, we can kind of take over where we can and carry the rest of the load until your games are ready to get to your customers. So for us, we offer multiple kind of checkpoints to make sure that you can see everything, that you can touch the things that are going to be in your game, and you can give us explicit approval. I like this, or you feel comfortable saying, I'm not crazy with how these turned out. How can we work this out better? Or how can we make this closer to what I want or closer to what I've promised my backers? And so what we try to do, or what I like to tell my clients, is to reach out as soon as possible. Like JT is absolutely right. You have to know what your stretch goals are so you don't wind up with a bigger bottom line than you realize. And so it's all about doing your research. And for us, because we have the workforce available at the very beginning to answer any of those questions, even those things that you know, I like to tell people, like, if it's keeping you up at night and you just think like, man, I really wonder if I could make this happen in a game. I've never seen it before. And it's really burning my brain. Like, send me an email, let me know, because we are all gamers and we want to brainstorm those things together. And we want to bring things out into the market that have never been done before. And we want to make everybody feel confident that their designs are going to be done justice. So we just try to offer as much as we can in the way of support to make all that stuff happen.
So actually, it's perfectly into one of our questions that we were just kind of bringing up is, how do you deal with people who approach something that's really novel or different than anything you've done before? Because I think maybe that kind of scares some people, or maybe some people are thinking, yeah, it'd be cool to do this, but what's going to the cost? What will the cost be, right? Right. So I guess we could start maybe going kind of smaller. We'll start at JT on your level, and then because I kind of want to connect it as we go to talking about some of the new technology you guys have been finding, because I'm sure that goes very much hand in hand with probably the requests you've been receiving in the last couple of years. So JT, someone comes to you with something that's really novel, different, you've never done it before. How do you start approaching that?
Well, in the past, we would have to say, no, sorry, we can't do that. To be able to pull off what we do on such a small scale, what we had to do is basically design our process around specific processes and tooling. And so we would already have everything ready to go so that when they made a request, you know, they wanted a deck of cards, we know how to make a deck of cards. They want a foldable game board, we know how to make that. And there has to be all the processing, tooling, training, all that kind of stuff in place for that. More recently, we've been building a lot more software, a lot more robots, that sort of thing, so that we can actually handle completely custom requests. So now, if you want a custom cut chipboard or custom cut cards or custom cut mats, stickers, any of that kind of stuff, you can actually upload die lines, which will then get translated into laser cut things, basically. And we can make any kind of shape that you want out of any material that you want. We've been experimenting most recently with actually doing custom meeples on the fly. So you'll be able to make any shape little piece that you need for your game. So that might be coming down the road not too long. So it's that kind of approach. It's trying to figure out how to do something on a really micro scale that normally, if you need to take a few hours to set up a machine or a process or something like that on a long run, you can do that. A few hours to us, the whole game has to be done in less than an hour, right? So we can't take time to set up a process. It just has to be done so it can ship. So yeah, that's the key with us. Like I said, recently, custom stickers, custom dice, custom chipboard, custom cards. Everything is custom. You upload not only what you want printed on these things, but also the cutting patterns for these things, and that allows us to do literally anything.
All right, and Kerry, can you guys start from the beginning with the game, or you actually prefer if someone approaches you with something that's somewhat been made as they go along? Which way do you approach it?
Well, there's a surprising amount of things that exist in the wild that we can get. So, a lot of times people may consider like, oh, this is an unattainable component, when in fact it's something that we can source. We've just never had a reason to. So I always say it never hurts to ask. And if you've got an idea like that up front, if it's something that you haven't seen in the wild before, there may be a reason for that. So you may just want to accommodate your time expectations and things like that, and be ready to hear that something may not be possible. But in general, we really like the idea of finding those new things, those things that maybe have never hit a table in any regard whatsoever, that can now be implemented in board games. And so, we always want to do our best to brainstorm those things and reach out to our production team and see if they have any leads elsewhere that we might not have access to, and really have a concerted effort to make it possible if we can.
Excellent. I'm going to ask some questions from the audience. Before I do that, though, I'm going to ask a question for myself. Sourcing. Sourcing is a huge thing that I don't think people actually understand. So, Kerry, you mentioned the word sourcing. Can you define what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's kind of a misconception, I think, in the industry that Panda reaches out to all different kinds of places for all of our stuff. And that isn't really true. We own the factory in which we assemble all of our games and do all of our printed material. So everything is under a Panda eye, as well as our plastics manufacturing. There are some things that we don't make directly in our factory, but we have long-standing relationships and partnerships with factories in China that can either acquire those things or make those things for us. So our wood is made at a Panda partner. But if you want, say, a little plastic bone that exists somewhere else, and we know a factory that we have a relationship with that happens to have a mold for those bones, then that's something that we can source. So generally speaking, we make almost everything that we do, and the things that we have to source, we have our owners are really good about visiting those places because they want to make sure that everything is up to Panda quality. If something is not being made directly by Panda employees, we want to make sure that when it hits the table with other Panda components, the consistency of quality is the same.
Okay, great. And JT, I know that some of the things that you guys have been offering lately at the Game Crafter is literally stuff, like lots and lots and lots of stuff. New things every day. So 3D constructible terrain, digital art and iconography that you can get. All this stuff, not just the components, but like stuff you need to like make the game actually. So can you tell us what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how you're finding people to make these things for you and share their source files or whatever in order so people can use it? How do you monetize that so people are making their fair share?
Sure. Well, in the case of artwork and graphics and cut lines and things like that, we just put up a shop, basically. People can upload their art. They set the price. They set the licensing terms. And when it sells, we give them their royalty paid to their PayPal account. We take a little sales fee off of it. So it was pretty simple. It's just a matter of writing some software to allow them to do that. And that's been going pretty well. We've got nearly, I think it's nearly 1,000 things things in that shop now where people can buy little icons or art or whatever, templates for things like that. And then, like you said, we're also making lots of game pieces and other things like that these days. Some of it is happening because we're commissioning it. We go to somebody in Germany or China or Canada or wherever and have them actually make a thing that's unique for us to sell in our shop. Sometimes it is stuff that we can get from other publishers. So there's, for example, we work a lot with like Jamie Stegmeyer, for example, and we'll buy overstock game pieces from him and sell those in our shop. So things that he had commissioned through Panda, because he works with them, or when Mayfair went out of business, we actually bought a whole bunch of stuff in their warehouse and sell that on our site now too, because they had extra stuff that they just didn't need anymore. So we do that kind of stuff. And then of course, we also manufacture our own game pieces in-house now. So we have a way to do that as well. So it's a little bit of everything. We have nearly 100 suppliers that we use to get game pieces from all over the world.
Wow, that's a big deal. We have some questions from the audience, so I'm going to go to those, Erica, if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's start with, do you want to do Zach Connolly one?
Yeah. So Zach Connolly asks, all too often we hear Kickstarter creators talk about delays in manufacturing. I feel like this is sometimes used to explain away errors on their part. What are some of the most common things that cause those delays? And I'm going to ask that to Kerry, because I'm sure that's something you often have to deal with as a account manager. So what are some things that often cause delays in printing and manufacturing? And then I'm going to add John Meitling's question to that as well. Obviously with Chinese New Year and the factory being in China, we have to be aware of that. Are there any other delay times that we have to be aware of for Panda? And then, we can turn that over to JT as well. So starting with Kerry, what are delays? What causes them most commonly? And are there periods of time we have to worry about?
It's a great question. It's one of those questions that's a big, it depends. I think one thing that people may not understand is that mass production in any industry, whether it's board gaming, whether you're making shoes or clothing or whatever, there is always a small margin of error in the process. And the reason is just because there's so many moving parts. You are checking on so many things. You have to have your eyes everywhere, which is one of the reasons we try to have as many checkpoints as possible. I think in some cases that does add on to the timeline, but we kind of bake that in at the very beginning. We let you know what to expect with those things kind of built into the process. And so the thing that I see most commonly kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning with file design or design verification and file preparation and things like that. For us, we kind of have a system down that once everything the digital proofs are ready to go and have been approved, then it's all on our shoulders, and that's a process that we can really get rolling. But until those files are ready to go, we kind of have our hands tied a little bit. So sometimes you see a delay there. And then, of course, occasionally, I have a game right now that was printed with another manufacturer for their first print run, and they are printing the expansion with us, and the cards need to match up, which is something that we can do, but also kind of comes with some unforeseen circumstances when something is printed on one printer and something is printed on another, and they're compared side by side. And so thankfully we have a great team for our production and on our production side. And so I've been working hand in hand with my manager there, and she is like printing cards and placing them side by side to make sure that they match up. But there's not really a way to know that that's going to happen until it does. And so if you can kind of anticipate some of those things on the front end, you can bake it into the date that you're expecting to deliver to your backers. That way, everybody is satisfied at the end of the day. And so that's as far as production. And then to touch quickly on different times of the year, there are some pretty extensive Chinese holidays. Really, February in general, I would say, is a wash. February is Chinese New Year. Everybody in China is off visiting their families for at least 3 weeks. And so our hands are kind of tied as far as production and things like that. And then another one that kind of sneaks up on people, I think, is Chinese National Week, which happens typically the first week of October. And so it's not that we can't do anything, but we can't get any pricing. We can't talk with our production team. We can't, make any moves on games for that week. And that's something to anticipate, because it's not just your game that has that holiday to deal with. It's everyone's games that have that holiday to deal with. Other than that, convention season is typically a little bit busier, but that is also something that we are constantly aware of and are trying to bake in and make sure you know what to expect along the way, so you're not surprised when we get to a point and you feel like, oh, I didn't know that this was going to take 3 weeks. Ideally, we'll be able to tell you this is likely going to take 3 weeks.
But okay, JT, on to you. What's happening in America in terms of delays and things like that?
Well, obviously we have holidays too, but not they aren't usually 3 weeks long. All the same stuff that can happen on a long run can happen on a short run. Some of the things Kerry mentioned, a whole bunch of things that were absolutely spot on. A few that she didn't mention. You can have like in the middle of winter, especially January in Wisconsin, everybody gets the flu. And so when you have like 3/4 of your staff out because they're all sick and you're all working together, right? So they're all in the manufacturing facility together. So it's communicable. It's gonna spread. And so when you have 3/4 of your staff out, the robots are only so smart. They're only going to go. They still need humans to operate them. So stuff like that can happen. Or I'll give you another freak accident there's freak accidents that can happen. One time, one of our shipments of the materials that we use to make game boards en route got to us. It had fallen off the pallet, essentially. The material had in transit shooken loose because it wasn't stabilized correctly. And so when it got to us, it was all crinkled and bent and broken. And so at that time, there also happened to be a chipboard shortage in the United States. There are only 4 companies in the United States that manufacture chipboard, and one of them went out of business. And that meant that there was a huge shortfall of chipboard. And then we just lost a whole semi-load of chipboard. Right. So we were delayed for about a month waiting for chipboard to come in because of something entirely out of our control. So all kinds of crazy things can happen. But yeah, what Kerry said is, spot on. Same things for us too.
Excellent. We have a bunch more questions. People are really loving the discussion, so thank you very much for your effort. Eric Slosson's asking for both guests, what are some things you offer that you are surprised more people don't actually use? For example, have people really jumped on the ability to UV coat everything at the Game Crafter? Is there any service at Panda that is underutilized, Kerry? What do you think? What are people not using that you wish they would, or that you just don't think they know?
Really, I see such a wide variety that it's hard for me to say people don't use anything. I think something that I would like to see used more frequently is screen printing meeples. I think it's a really, really, really cool and relatively inexpensive way to give a lot of personality to a painted piece of wood. And I think that can add a lot of visual value. And I think that that's something that I'm seeing more and more in the industry, is that people are expecting more from their games as far as quality and the way that it looks on their table. They want something that's beautiful on their shelves. They want something that their friends who maybe never play board games are going to think like, oh, those pieces look so cool. Okay, I'll play this game. And so I think that people, it's important to look outside the box a little bit, which is of course an appropriate pun, but consider some things and really look at other games that are doing stuff. But for me, I see so many people already doing innovative things with components that exist, that it's hard for me to really put my finger on any one thing that people aren't touching already.
Well, hopefully you'll see some more screen printed meeples and such
Yeah.
if everything goes well with the Belfort reprint. So that'd be
Yes.
you should hear about that sometime soon. JT, what about you? What's not used at the Game Crafter?
Like Kerry, I think everything is used. I don't know. Let's see. Well, spot gloss is something that's not used as much as it could be. It's a feature that we introduced earlier this year. I mean, it's obviously been in long run forever, but to be able to do it in short run is amazing. And it's not used as much as it probably could be. I think the biggest thing is actually people often undersell themselves. They'll go with the cheapest version of a component. We have good, better, best kind of methodology to the things that we manufacture generally. So we'll have, a cheap way to make dice, a medium expensive way to make dice, and then a really expensive way to make dice, but they come out looking amazing, right? And that's true of most components, boxes, boards, whatever. So a lot of times people will go with the least expensive one, which I understand. Everybody's got a budget that they're working with, that sort of thing. But a lot of times, if you're coming to us to manufacture a prototype or a short run of games, the whole point is to give a good impression to whoever you're showing it to, right? Because when you're doing your early playtests and stuff like that, a lot of times you're going to print it out at home on whatever crappy printer you happen to have. And so you're not worried about the presentation as much there. You can cheap out a little there. But if you're doing it for the purposes of presentation, put your best foot forward and get the thing that will make your game look the best it possibly can.
All right. We're going to continue on with some questions from the audience. We have another one specifically for Kerry. How do you suggest coding product iterations or variations with variables such as stretch goals? It's easier to deal with one code at a time, or is it more complex itemized list? So how should they sort of approach this? Say, this is kind of what I'm thinking in the long term. Can they keep coming back to you? How should that process kind of look?
That's a really good question, because that's something that we see a lot. I think the biggest thing that is important for people to understand is we are working with our production team. And so if you send us changes or revisions, we're happy to price literally anything you want us to. But each one of those revisions takes time. So I always suggest, if you have, say we've already quoted your base game and you want to know how much it is to add a character pack, whatever that means, send everything that you will need to know for that stretch goal at once. That way we can reach out to our team, get pricing for everything, and get it back to you as quickly as possible, instead of alternatively asking for pricing on Monday, and then we reach out to our team, and then Thursday you say, well, actually I want to add this on and this on and this on, because then our team has to start from scratch, and that kind of starts that process over again. So that'll really cut back on some time. And I think it's important with stretch goals in general, not just for pricing them, to keep them simple. Having, simple, straightforward ideas of what your stretch goals will be super valuable when it comes to communicating those things to your clients. But for us, it makes it a little easier, number one, to keep everything straight from the first version of your quote to the fifth version of your quote, to make sure you're not constantly having to dig through and say, well, the rule sheet should be the same as version 2, but these meeples should be the same as version 3. So making kind of concise groups of information is really helpful. And then if you feel that an expansion or something like that you want to offer will be packaged separately, sometimes those sorts of things are better to do as a secondary quote. So you could submit, say you have a base game that's in a 12 by 12 box, and then you have a tuck box worth of components that you want to add on. Submit your base game and say, game players game 1, and then submit a second quote and say game players game 1, expansion 1. And we can kind of keep them straight that way. But when in doubt, use the comment boxes on the quote form and ask as many questions as possible, because we want to make sure that everybody's real clear about what's going on.
Right. Great. Lots of great answers. The audience is loving it. They're asking more questions. Let's see. Erica, did you ask a question from Zach Connolly?
He's got a couple in there. I think the next one is so John's asking, what happens when it all goes wrong, meaning large quantities of product do not match the proofs or are damaged? All right, who do you want to start with this one?
You can start with
Let's go to JT.
Okay.
You kind of touched on it with your chipboard story in there. What?
Right, yeah. Well, there are. It depends on what stage that it goes wrong, and what caused it to go wrong. So obviously, like the chipboard story that I told you, that's its own thing. But if it's something where we printed something wrong, we generally try to, or cut something wrong or whatever, we generally try to catch that at the factory before we're even shipping it out. We have multiple checkpoints, just like Kerry does at Panda. But sometimes something will happen in shipping, or sometimes a game designer won't have actually ordered a proof copy. Like they'll order a proof copy of a game, make a whole bunch of changes, and then not order another proof copy, and so they won't actually see what this is, and then they'll order 500 copies of the game and be upset because it didn't come out the way they anticipated. So the first thing is always order a proof copy, right? And we do their online proofing tools, and that's great, but there's nothing like seeing it in your hand. So before you're spending that money, when people order bulk, we generally do check it. There's a human checking it, and we'll interact with the customer in a similar fashion to what Kerry is. But our business is very different from Panda's. Ours is very automated. It's a lot more robots than humans, and so no. Well, as far as you know.
That sounds like something a robot would say.
It does sound exactly like something a robot would say.
So anyway, there's that kind of stuff. But yeah, if something goes wrong in shipping or something along that line, we just make it right. Contact customer service. Send us a photo of the damage that happened or whatever, and we'll get a new copy sent out right away. That's one of the benefits of using us for, a lot of people run a small Kickstarter that doesn't get 1,500 units, so it gets 100 units or 150 units or whatever. We do the shipping for you, the logistics aspect, and because we're doing the shipping and the printing, that whole thing, anything goes wrong at any point in that process, we consider ourselves liable for it, and we'll ship out print a new copy and ship it out immediately. So that would be my answer for that.
Oh, that's really interesting, because you guys do both the printing and the shipping at the back end. That you kind of are a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
And that means you're on the hook if something goes wrong at any point in that process. But that's also a good thing, because if nothing else, I've learned over my years of game design and interacting with communities is that there ain't no community like the game crafter community in a lot of ways. That is one super positive, really good to work with community. I don't get there enough because I don't do a lot of game crafter stuff. Sorry, JT, but you know what I mean. They are really helping each other, and I think that sense of community pervades the whole entire operation. When you have it leading from the top, when it's a company that says, "Yeah, we're gonna take care of you from start to finish." Yeah, there's a lot of robots, but there's also a lot of humans, and we do what we can to make errors, not as costly to everybody,
right,
as possible. Cool. Kerry, we have a question for you. How far in advance do you think someone should shop for quotes before launching their Kickstarter? At what point is too far in advance, do you think? What do you think, Kerry?
I don't think there is a too far in advance.
Okay.
I have clients that I've been working with since I started with Panda that we are still iterating on their quotes. And we totally understand that. Like I've said, a couple of times before, we're all gamers. And so for us, we know that game design is not done when you think it's done. We know that playtesting can change everything. And we know that sometimes, when you have a little opportunity to spend, some time during your design process playing other games, you might be inspired to change what you've got going on. And so we are super, super flexible with that sort of thing. I'm of the opinion that the more you know, the better. You can never be too informed. And so, I think if you start that process as soon as possible, you're in good shape. One thing to note, and this is kind of a new thing for Panda, our quotes used to be valid for a month. We've been able to extend those for 2 months' time. So what that has enabled us to do is if you, decide on pricing right when your Kickstarter campaign begins, that quote will still be valid at the end of your campaign when your Kickstarter money has rolled in and you're ready to move forward into production.
Oh, that is amazing. That is really, really good because a lot of people get caught on that.
And I think that's a good washout moment right there too, guys. The price can change.
Yes. No, I'm sorry. And that is you're absolutely right. And I don't think that that's been brought up yet, that exchange rates change all the time globally. And especially when you're working with an international company, that is something to consider. We try to kind of guard you from that, any impact that will have as best we can, and update things as we get them, and try to make sure that we're kind of staying up to date on market fluctuations on our end and accommodating for them. But for people who reach out in August and then want their quote the following February, the price will likely be different based on what's happening in the market.
Yeah, excellent points there. Here's a question for you, JT. I know Ming wanted to ask Kerry, but this is actually probably more appropriate for you. I don't know. Kerry, you might have an answer too. Ming wants to know, speaking of crappy printers at home, what is a good printer for home printing? Specifically for doing smooth cardstock or linen cardstock. What do you think, JT? Is there one that somebody could buy at home that would give them a decent quality printout for like a print and play that they wanted to make look really good?
Well, I can't give you a specific model number, but I can give you features to look for in a printer.
Oh, excellent. That's even better.
So the things, first of all, inkjet is out the window. It is way too expensive on the ink to be printing stuff with that. Laser is way better. So get yourself a good color laser. And the most important thing you can do when buying a printer, whether it be inkjet or laser, is to get as straight of a paper path as you possibly can. So if the paper makes an S shape as it's going through the printer, there's no way cardstock is going to make it through that.
So the one that I have that does a G shape is not good.
Yeah, that's not good. So as straight as it possibly can for printing on that thicker material. A lot of times printers, if you get a good one, will have a what's called a sheet bypass. So in the back of the printer, you can actually feed in a sheet rather than coming out of a drawer. And then that means that the sheet will actually go straight down through the printer like this, and it won't bend so much, and therefore you'll be able to feed thicker stocks through it.
Wow. Some knowledge has been dropped. That's awesome. Cool.
Or go to Staples, people, and just print it.
Well,
it's pretty
use
cheap.
a Game Crafter, right? I mean,
or use a Game Crafter. I just meant if you're prototyping, like small amounts. And he's talking about at-home printing. I'm just saying, maybe don't.
So lots of good questions. Anything from you, Erica, that you wanted to ask our lovely panelists?
Well, what I'm really curious about is if there's any fun future technologies, because we've been talking a lot about how things have changed a lot in the last couple of years. You guys keep picking up newer and newer things, especially as people are asking for more and more diverse, I should say, have more and more diverse needs. Is there any future fun stuff we could expect or could be coming down the pipe? I'm curious if anyone has an answer. If you don't, that's cool. I'm just curious if there's anything that's like coming.
Who wants to go?
Well, I actually already mentioned one earlier that we've been actually working on custom Meeple. So basically any shape that you want with any printing on it that you want, that's a thing that we've been developing, which is traditionally something you can only do long run. And it's a thing that we have been developing. We've actually done it for a number of publishers already. We can only do it. We have to do a minimum of 100 of something at the moment, but we have a process that we think we can get down to a single Meeple. So
wow.
Yeah.
Wow, because I have a bunch of Meeples that I have to test and make. So I'm coming to you, JT. I'm coming to you.
Yeah.
Now, okay. So when we're talking Meeples, are we talking like 2D extruded Meeples?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, 2D extruded with printing on it.
Okay, that's still cool. I might need something a little different, but we'll chat.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, if you're looking for 3D printed stuff, there are plenty of companies like Shapeways and stuff like that.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Wood. I like wood.
Oh,
and actually
3D and wood. Okay.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, you were on my feed when I was like drooling over the Carvey, right? The X Carvey.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So that kind of thing just blows my mind. I love 3D stuff in wood. But anyways, people are talking about Paul Saxberg from Rocks the Game said, if you want to see new features on the Game Crafter, just refresh every few minutes. There's going to be something new. Right?
Well, Kerry, is there anything new from you guys that you can share?
Yeah.
I mean, nothing immediately comes to mind that I can share.
That's fair.
I will say that every Gen Con is a big, obviously a big show for us. A lot of our clients are there. And one thing that we have been trying to offer over the past few years is what's called a designer toolkit. In the designer toolkit, it's a nice box. That's a good example of what we can do with our boxes.
Sam's gonna pull one out. There we go.
Yes. Which edition do you have? The black one? That's a good one.
This is last.
I should have my other one next to me, but I
have. Nope, this is a different person's one. But
don't show that one. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally.
You had one totally before. Oh, and this is long packs.
There we go. Look, everyone's getting a show right now. It's great.
Yeah.
Here's Panda's cards. Oh, by the way, so just as a note, if you're in Canada, in the Toronto area, or coming into the Toronto area at the end of August, I know that JF will be with me at Fan Expo. I believe we're setting all that stuff up right now. So he'll be doing some panels on the same stuff Kerry's talking about. You can meet him and talk to him and do all that kind of stuff with him there. He'll have similar packages to this to hand out. The book will be there. JF's awesome. I've worked with him on like 4 or 5 different projects. It's great. So definitely come out. Look for Panda near you. If you can't get to Gen Con or Origins, sometimes they're at some of the other shows, right? Oh, sorry, Kerry. Go ahead and tell us all about that other thing that you were trying to tell us about before I cut you off. Oh, I think Kerry's frozen. Kerry, you're frozen. No.
Am I back? Am I back?
Shit, you're back.
She's back.
And we're back. All right. Well, anyway, all I was going to say is every year we try to include some new stuff, some stuff that we've kind of been messing around with. Gen Con 2018 is no different. My favorite thing last year, we had a clear plastic card measurer. So you could, as you're playing a game, if you thought, man, I wonder what size cards these are, you could hold the measurer up right to it and be able to tell.
Because that's what I do every time I'm playing a game.
I can tell you.
I don't doubt you do.
Right. If you're considering components when you're considering, then that should maybe start them. But I can promise you that the Gen Con 2018 box is not disappoint. 100% will not disappoint.
Cool. So I just cut my nails, so it's really hard for me to get this out of the box. But I'm going to show. This is the card measurer that Kerry was just talking about. So it has all sorts of dimensions of cards: US Mini, Euro Mini, poker, bridge, etc., etc. So it's a good way to kind of visualize what card sizes are. And I'm sure they can do more than these ones. So this is just common card sizes, right? If you want 70 mil by 70 mil square cards, they can do that. But these are just the common ones. Also in here, there's a spinner that you can put together. You got all sorts of coins in here. It's quite nice. And there's lots of stuff in this little bag. So it's a cool, cute bag as well. So lots of good stuff inside those Panda GM boxes. Like for the amount of size of this box, there's so much stuff in there to play with.
And they make awesome prototype boxes. I'll put that out there too.
Because they are magnetized and they're really cool. So JT, where's your box, buddy?
Oh man, I can't compete with Panda on that front. It's pretty amazing. Their box is pretty amazing.
We work so well hand in hand, us and the Game Crafter, that we will give you all the toolkits you want.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's true. We do trade customers like crazy, actually. So
we do.
And that's the beautiful thing, right?
It's a feed system. We just
neither of these manufacturers people out there watching is really better than the other. They're like I said, I think yesterday on the late Mail Call Monday, I did a Mail Call Tuesday. I said it's not an end of the spectrum. It's specific tools for specific jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's the need.
Yeah, it's the need. If you fulfill your need with the Game Crafter, awesome. And if that leads you to then need to go to Panda for your 2000 print run, awesome. I think JT's even happy. Yep. JT, you'd be happy with that, right?
Absolutely.
Because
because then you get the product that you need, and you'll be back to the Game Crafter for your next game.
Cool. Oh, hey, Erica, that's a great question. I'm just reading the question feed in the side there. Go ahead, ask that one. That's hilarious.
All right, because we're just getting down to the end, and I'm really curious because there's probably got to be some good stories here. What's the craziest request you've given? It could be serious, or it could be like, I don't know what this person was thinking, but I gotta think there's some interesting things have come down the pipes.
And it'd be even better if that person was named Eric Slauson.
Or you could just call him that for now. But anyway.
What do you think? Is there anything, Kerry, that you know of?
I do. I have one example that I keep going back to, and the designer's actually, I've met him a bunch of times at different shows and gotten a chance to sit down and play his game. And he's still in development, but he has this incredible idea of you actually physically construct a turntable that moves and is used during gameplay. And when he first came to me through the inbox. I had never met him before, and it was just a quote assigned to me. And I impossible.
Oh. Kerry seems to have dropped again. Okay, she's going to do the am I back soon. So we're going to go to JT's and we'll fill that in a second.
My production team.
Oh.
No. Am I there? No. Am I lost?
Yeah, we dropped you again for a second. So go ahead.
Talk about
the turntable.
Yeah, so it works during the game. Basically, he sent me a YouTube video of how it fits together. And I was able to send that YouTube video to my production team. Yes, this is possible, and it will cost X amount. And we've been able to iterate back and forth. So I think that's probably the most unique and one of the most exciting design ideas I've seen so far. Did you get all that?
Yes,
we did that.
I figured it all
out.
Right. Yes, that's awesome. JT, what about you? What's come to the Game Crafter that you haven't been able to make, or that you were able to make and you were amazed that it could happen?
Well, there's this crazy game designer in Canada that has been asking for basically lathed wooden pieces for his prototype game on this podcast. So
the nerve of him.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
No.
I thought you were talking about Sylvain's stuff. Sylvain's stuff's pretty
Sylvain's stuff is amazing. We do all kinds of crazy stuff with him all the time. But let's see, crazy stuff.
Can I ask you to Sylvain? I haven't checked lately, but the buildings that Sylvain produced for a bunch of his games, did he let those out into the open as open source for people, or not open source, but people to buy the templates?
He did not, to my knowledge, put them out open source. He's still trying to pitch the game to publishers, so I don't know, but he didn't. But I will tell you this: there is a YouTube video that is coming out on the Game Crafters channel in a few weeks that shows you exactly how to make those.
Excellent.
So
they're really cool. Like if you want to make some miniature war game terrain, and you like giant robots and small buildings,
right?
Really nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
people are hoping that you make an edible board game. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, no, I've heard that before. I also, there are lots of people that get angry when we don't have a striped purple unicorn in our shop, and why don't we carry that? Let's see. Actually, the craziest thing that we've implemented recently that actually people have been asking for like crazy is foil packs. So the reason it's crazy is this. Traditionally, how that is done is you get a roll of Mylar that is about 10,000 feet long, and you print on it, and then it goes onto a reel on the other end, and then you take that reel and you feed it through a machine, and you pop in whatever product that you have, candy bars or game cards or whatever. So you got to make a ton of things when you do Mylar packaging
to make even that Mylar worth printing on.
Exactly.
Wow.
So obviously, we're not going to do a 10,000-foot roll of Mylar for a one-off game. So, but we've implemented a new process that allows you to print one booster pack at a time in Mylar. And so, yeah.
But that's awesome, because I think I'm going to use it just for a joke. No, really, not as a joke game, but like as because boosters are so funny. Like they have such a mental grasp on certain types of player types that it'd be interesting to use them as a mechanic.
Oh, it's something
Anyways.
shiny that you get to open that contains a surprise. Like, what's not to love?
Legacy game.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm thinking about. Well, I'm thinking about the one that Daryl's doing of ours, right? So there's stuff in there that could be done in that kind of Mylar. That's pretty cool. Hook boxes, says Eric Slauson.
Oh yeah, people really love the hook box. So the hook box is basically a tuck box, but instead of having something that tucks in, two pieces of the cardstock actually hook together, and you can unhook it and unfold it, and the entire inside is printed, so you can use the inside as a manual or a game board or whatever.
Right, and then stuff folds flat too, right?
Yes.
If you wanted to pack it, so flat pack, build the box, etc., etc.
Yep.
Cool. Have you seen anybody use like the Spot UV for anything really interesting, like not graphic, like actually game mechanics using the spots?
I haven't. No, I mean, people are using.
They should be.
They
really
should
cool.
be. I agree. But no, I haven't. It's used for very traditional stuff, like just little extra decorations. So I saw one guy put tire tracks. He had this, game board that was about driving around on a sand dunes, and he put tire tracks in Spot UV on it. So it was very nice decoration, but it's again decoration. It's not for mechanically.
All right, I'm going to write this down right now as something to do. Use Spot UV mechanically. That is a thing. Oh, hey, Kerry, can you talk about the myth of delay in Panda?
Yes.
Remember that discussion we had at Origins? Yeah, please do, because I think people need to know this.
Yes, for sure. I think there's definitely a misconception that Panda has this huge backlog that we're never going to get to your game if you're not a huge game company, if you're not Stonemaier Games or something like that. And that's just not the case. Of course, when we have companies that are printing, 100,000 copies of a game at a time, sure, we need to kind of accommodate for that because so much of our equipment and our manpower is going to be taken up. But in general, if you have a game that you've kickstarted, it's not going to be, you're put into a line. Once we have a specific process, and once we get to mass production in your game and your game's process, your game goes to the printer or your game goes to press. And so, I think a lot of people just assume that they could never, ever, ever print with Panda. And we're really actively trying to reach out to people and say, like, no, we want you to print with Panda, especially if you've got smaller games, because Jamie Stegmaier started out somewhere, and for us, we want to nurture.
I think she's going to say nurture.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is sad.
Oh no, she froze.
She froze again.
Well, you know what? We're kind of out of time, so she'll pop back in at some point. But we'll just explain quickly. Because hopefully she can still hear us.
Yeah.
We always end the show with our guests giving a piece of advice to the audience, one piece of advice that they'd like to pass on. So JT, why don't we go to you until we get back, Kerry?
Okay. I actually want to do a piece of advice that is also a bit promotional, and I'm sorry about that, but it is good. This isn't about the Game Crafter. This is about, there's a little convention that I run here in Madison called Protospiel Madison. The day before that, I run a convention called CrafterCon, and it is a convention just for game designers to up their skills in the industry. So we have all kinds of industry experts come in. For example, this year we'll have an intellectual property lawyer that is there that you can ask questions about for, licensing artwork or doing licensing with a publisher, that sort of thing. We will have a professor who teaches game design at a university there giving a lecture. We'll have a professional writer there helping you write better rules, all kinds of things. So it's a one-day convention. It costs you $50, and it is probably the single best thing you can do for your fledgling game designer career.
Okay, cool. And when is that? The dates again?
November 29th is CrafterCon, and then Protospiel will be November 30th through December 2nd.
Okay, perfect. And Kerry...
And you can go to craftercon.com to get to it.
So. Oh, awesome. Thank you very much. Kerry, do you have one piece of advice to give to our game designing audience out there, maybe for dealing with Panda, maybe for dealing with manufacturing? One piece of advice.
I think I'll just research what you really want for your game, and make sure that you communicate with us. We are here to listen to you and know more. The more we can consider the manufacturing end when it comes to choosing components and stuff like that.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So on that note, we're going to say goodbye to everybody. We're running just a little bit over time. And thank you very much for hanging out with us, Paul, Eric, John, Ming, Zach, etc., 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 etc. And of course, our wonderful guests, JT and Kerry. There she is. There he is. And Erica, of course, is always here with us. So we'll see you guys.
So much.
No problem. We'll see you guys in 1 week for our last show before we're going on summer hiatus.
We'll say summer hiatus. Though we'll see. Maybe we'll do little things in there. But yeah, we won't do a weekly schedule just yet.
Yeah. We need to get our game on in terms of Gen Con.
Gen Con.
Eric and I will be at Dice Tower Con if you want to hang out with us. That is
Gen Con.
That is a good con to hang out with us, though.
That is a good con to hang. Yes.
Not so good at
Gen Con. No, we'll be running to like booths and body checking people. But at Dice Tower, yes, we can sit down. It's a lot easier.
Yeah. And JT, we'll see you at Gen Con.
Absolutely.
And Kerry, we'll see you at Gen Con. Oh, Kerry's all frozen again.
Go see Panda at Gen Con.
Absolutely.
There
she is. Gen Con. I'm here. Go to Gen Con.
Gen Con. Okay, so we'll see you guys all later. Thanks very much. Good night, Meeps. We'll see you in a bit.
Bye-bye.
Bye.